Welcome to our fall lecture series. This is the first lecture in our fall series. It's wonderful to be here tonight. My name is Marcelyn Gow. I'm an undergraduate programs chair here at SCI-Arc. And I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's speaker, Luigi Alberto Cippini. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Luigi is the director of Armature Globale. And it's sort of an interesting situation because last semester, in a course that I was teaching on contemporary discourse, two of my students who are here tonight, Ari Topelson and Marie Donaldson, who I see sitting here, had brought this work to my attention. I was not familiar with the work of Armature Globale, and we were having a discussion in the class about the ways in which images and artifacts can be used to productively interrupt the kind of seamless reception of communication in architecture. And so they produced a very thoughtful work, a presentation of this work. And I remember we talked about, I said, it would be wonderful to hear from Luigi here at SCI-Arc about the work from the perspective of the author. So I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to do that. And I think that's one of the really amazing moments where content inside of the classroom, content in public programs begins to kind of intersect and produce a dialogue. So as I said, Luigi is the director of Armature Globale, and when consulting the Oxford English Dictionary, we find armature defined in multiple ways, which I think is actually really kind of matches some of the things that I'm picking up on in the work of Armature Globale. It's defined as the underlying structure or framework of something abstract or non-material. But it's also defined within the field of architecture as the wooden or metal framework around which a building is constructed, a piece or section of this. So it has really a structural kind of logic, both in terms of the idea of tectonics and assembly in architecture, how we might create structures and literally create armatures, but also how we might create conceptual armatures for thought and for ways of seeing the world. So I think that's what we may hear about tonight. Luigi Alberto Cippini graduated from the Architectural Association in London and is an architect based in Milan. And his studio is an emerging architecture and urbanism practice, and his work has centered on advanced curatorial patterns and experimental exhibition architecture. Something maybe we could talk about as well is the role of this work in terms of a discussion of the multi-hyphenate, perhaps. Research has been carried out primarily with BE5K Confinement, Fondazione Prada, and the EU, also with Fondazione Prada Osservatorio. Alongside conducting research on media, Cippini was the curator of the Fondazione Prada Cinema until June of 2022. Sturm and Drang, also at the Prada Foundation in 2021, curated together with Freddie Fischli and Niels Olsen, is a recent museum project, providing a platform for a collaboration between the Foundation and the Institute for History and Theory of Architecture at the ETH, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. Instantiated as an experimental studio in 2021. Cippini's work has also been published in the monograph Mosh Pit, Kaleidoscope 2021. So Armature Globale has completed projects engaging exhibition practice and is currently working on a series of houses that I think we might hear about tonight as well in Europe. And their work also asks us to consider how might architectural thinking be mobilized to productively disrupt and offer alternative ways of seeing and constructing. So please join me in welcoming Luigi Alberto Cippini to SCI-Arc.
Okay, ciao, I'm Luigi, and I direct this studio, which is called Armature Globale, which is, in reality, is a French name that I got because I had to sign an exhibition, and a friend of mine basically just got rejected from the Confinement festival, the director saying that his movie missed Armature Globale, which I thought was something like ThyssenKrupp, and looked like, I don't know, the name of a French rock band from the hinterland of Paris. And I thought it was cool. So today I'm gonna basically give you an overview in 258 slides. I'm gonna speak very fast because it's, I think, too much work. And I'm gonna simply give an overview of the things that we do in like museums and in cultural production, and then I'm gonna switch to basically what has been stressing me out and basically transforming me in the stereotypical architect with no hair and, you know, super slim like a zombie, which is trying to start and building. So basically I called this exhibition, this presentation A4Shit because I don't really give basically, I would say I don't really give a fuck about the way that the profession needs to behave in order to, in a way, convince clients, estate developers, cultural institution, and basically the public to do architecture or to build architecture. So what you're going to see is basically most of the raw facts that I produce in the studio, and also the way we present projects to clients, and basically that's it. So I'm just going to give you a small introduction about what I feel like we do. I think we do like suicidal modernism, which is a kind of, I don't know, I've always been convinced that there is architecture, which is discipline, and within the discipline you could be a professional, and you can switch identity, like it doesn't really matter. And then basically, which is a kind of, I don't know, like universal value that basically collects together all the architects. And I've always wanted to be outside of a discipline, and so I believe that what we try to do, maybe sometimes trying too hard, is to do extreme authorship. And the only way that I can describe what we do is a sort of suicidal droning mode by which every choice we take, every model we make, and every move you make is suicidal in the sense that it doesn't collaborate, or it doesn't provide any ground for, in a way, compromise. We try to be what we can be, and otherwise I would simply go and open another random studio. So I have one main, in a way, concern and credo, that's the word I think, which is, I'll call it NOP form. Like what we do is mostly people or like students that come in the studio, or like, I don't know, other random passers-by say we do super form in the sense that everything looks weird. And I'm sort of convinced by, I don't know, by the books that you generally read when you are a teenager, that whatever I will do in my life will be concerning like anti-composition, but it doesn't really sound good. And so I believe that what we do is not non-form, we do NOP form. And so I'll go about art. So I believe that art today is kind of a dead environment, and I believe that most of the museums in the world, with no exception, are basically sort of transforming themselves into what I call dark Louvre, which is the biggest possible, most amazing exhibition that you could create for the biggest and widest public possible, hence no public. And basically I was lucky enough, thank you. So I was lucky enough to get scouted and start working in institution when I was still a student. And I'm sort of culturally spoiled, so I managed to meet all my heroes, and I managed to make exhibition in places or institutions that generally people take, I don't know, 10 years to go there. And so it was a bit of a shock, and what I decided to do with the possibilities that I had was to do at every possible new project to do the worst exhibition possible, because I was convinced that museums needs to go back to basically to a condition which they are still critical platform, and I was completely, in a way, offended by the fact that what we show today, or how we curate exhibition, how we design exhibition, is something that really doesn't overcome like a sort of bourgeois state of mind in which the only things that matter is the better you look, the more you see. And so with this, very stupid sort of mantra, I started making exhibition. This is an exhibition that we made at the ETH during COVID, and it was basically an exhibition on confinement. This is so problematic, no? Should I just scream? Okay. So we were in Switzerland, we were at ETH, which I think is the worst school in the world because it doesn't really provide any entitlements to students, or at least it doesn't really create students that can design architecture. It makes people that can only relate to architecture through, in a way, references, histories, and pattern. And it's a sort of school which I completely hate in a way, but I'm also completely in love with because it's so beautiful, you can do so much thing. And I'm always, in a way, incredibly depressed, but in a way, in a romantic way, by the fact that what you have at your disposal is something that you will never use because you are mostly concerned with making things that look like in the 70s. And every time I'm there, I really want to die. And I really don't understand why, in a way, we still consider Switzerland a place where you can make great architecture, because in a way, the only thing you could do is to make, in a way, conformist building that simply add to a global trend in which the lexicon becomes a sort of, I don't know, financial state of mind or financial universus in which every architect needs to comply with, because otherwise we don't understand that we are architects. And I really would love to, I'm a very little guy with a very little studio, but if I can do something like in a very important school with like no budget, I would really love to destroy basically the Swiss mode of architecture. And so what we did was, simple walls in glass with no technology, and we simply burnt it and painted, and the exhibition looked like that, like with no interest, with no affair with the school, with no intention of showcasing anything, and apparently everybody loved it. And this is my first project. It's called Belligerent 5K Confinement. This is Sylvain Lotranger, the founder of Semiotext. This project I started designing when I was, like, I believe, like 22. And it was intended to be at Fondazione Prada in Venice. And the first time I had a chance to make a project with an incredible amount of money, I decided that during the Venice Biennale, the moment in which this project was about to happen, I would close Fondazione Prada and not allow anybody to be in, because it was designed to be a sort of school for like 16 people that would use the environment as a recording technology to learn contemporary image making. And so the project, I mean, you don't see anything, of course, but the project was made of walls that had these holes like peoples, and all these holes had cameras in it and lights, and you could really use the entire environment to record everything. And I'm, in a way, I only ask to, we make a big, so when you're a young architect, every time you do a project, even though it's just a box or a piece of wood, you try to make the most out of it. Like, you try to display it as if it's the biggest project ever. And what I decided to do with this sort of massive project in which we involved so many people was to, I called a Japanese photographer and I asked him to basically portray the project in a way in which you didn't understand anything, because I was convinced that in order to go against the grain, we had to make a cult project by reducing information. And then, of course, I kept on working with Fondazione with a photographic exhibition in which photographies were not really displayed, and other shows in international institutions like the Mudam in Luxembourg, in which we were tasked to make a remake of the 1955 Edward Steichen MoMA exhibition, The Family of Man, which was designed by Paul Rudolph, and Francesco Bonami was the curator, and it was only a video work exhibition, and what we decided to do was to basically showcase video works by contemporary artists with technologies that belong to exhibition set design from the 50s. And so we covered the full museum with synthetic wood to basically sort of signify the fact that exhibition design really stands for nothing, is a 3-month sort of effort that is going to simply, in a way, comply with the fact that you pretend that art pieces should be seen in a different way, but nobody really cares. And so, at the end, the only thing you could really do is to, make a sort of critical statement or a sort of protest against what we call exhibition today, which are simply, displays of work. And so these were images, and this was another show that we did at the Prada shop by Herzog & de Meuron in Japan. It was part of a 3-part exhibition we curated with Freddy Fischl and Peter and Niels Olsen from ETH about the physical manifestation of the physical technology that are used in the production of CGI. So we simply occupied the Herzog & de Meuron shop, which is like a multi-million project, which is so beautiful, with the worst and most poor physical technologies that are still in use in when you make basically CGI movies or CGI projects. And
I'm sorry.
And the main idea was to go to Japan, which is a country which has an incredible development or an incredible intelligence or a natural sort of link with anything digital or virtual, and to make something that was relating to computer-generated images, but using the worst material possible, the poorest technology, and the sort of dumbest critical thinking. And of course, it was a success. And these are some images of while we were constructing it. But the main thing, I mean, people do exhibition every day. I know professors or like academics that have 10 years of career, and what at the end they can do or they can survive with is work in museums, making an exhibition. So I believe it is a correct channel of communication for architecture. But in a way, for me, exhibition has always been a natural factor, in the sense that museums are for me like an high school. I love to be in them and I love to work with art. But at a certain level, I also am convinced by the fact that we should not believe in cultural institutions anymore or in museums anymore, because curatorial patterns and the way that art is displayed, moved, organized, and simply communicated to the art press or the sort of communication media that museums use is a sort of rigged system that doesn't really, in a way, pursue any, in a way, honesty or novelty. Like, in a way, the cutting edge is dead. And so for me, exhibitions are always about like brutalizing in the most correct way and honest way the space in which art should be displayed, and in a way not making an aesthetic out of it, but making it a sort of aesthetical terrorism or a sort of intervention in the field of what you should believe museums are. And if we believe that we can destroy a museum, we're going to be free again, and we're going to have more possibilities to have a better art. which is so, in a way, romantic and silly and stupid, but I still believe about that. And this is something that then I sort of transferred into architecture, the love for art. And this is a project that we were asked to participate in, which is the memorial for Babyn in Ukraine before the war. We were asked to come up with ideas. And I ate memorials in the sense that, if you know a bit about the organization of a museum, memorials are, I don't know, 10 years of discussion for the most static show possible. And so what we did was to install what we called memorial technologies, in the sense that these places or these devices, architectural devices, were placed at highlighted or hyphened areas in the Babyn basically land, to simply sign moments of history. But instead of making a sort of aesthetics out of that, we made the most neutral, technical, and in a way technological memorial possible. And these were all sort of architectural things that had the maximum amount of technologies in order to display art. So like lighting system and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, these, they didn't like it at all. They were so offended by it. These were moments of the presentation. So we designed a lot of objects, and all the objects had a simple shelter value, in the sense that in order to showcase art, you need to only provide heat and light. And this is what we did, and we try to be the most neutral, stereotypical, possible architectural film ever. And I was, in a way, really convinced that like you could have a memorial museum or a memorial architectural project that could say something about art today, but apparently you can't. And these were other moments of exhibition that I've designed. This is in Fondazione Prada in Milano. And so in a way, this is like the most important image for me ever. It's called Petit Genre. And there is, so one of the most sadistic and violent moments in the history of art is the institutionalization of French paintings. So in a way, painters had to undergo an incredible stressing social, basically disciplinary process by which they could access a status by which they could be exhibited. And it could take, I don't know, 5 years of, I don't know, public relations, institutional talk, and basically economical drama. And this is a part of a show that we did in this beautiful museum in Milan next to Duomo. And like at a certain point, exhibitions are just huge barracks made of wood. And it's never about, in a way, quality or like vision or like critical practice. At the end, you should understand that the amount of things or operation that you can do in a museum are so limited that the only thing that we could do is really, or you could ever do, is use basically wood walls and paint them. And so in a way, this is my mantra right now, which is stop figurative painting now, basta. And now we go to the project. So we also try to build constantly. We are yet to finish a building, not for the huge lack of trying. And this is one of the sort of first real, we made actually 43 projects of like building projects, but we are, I believe, only in the process of having finished a very little flat in Milan and building an house. And so we survived like many young firms do with design development and basically international clients in a status of sort of constant excitement, because you are always about to make a project, but in a way knowing the fact that like you will never be able to do that. And in a way, like if you are an emerging practice, you live in a sort of microdosing status in which you are microdosed with the fact that, yes, you could build, you could see a building, and you can learn that like your project maybe sucks. But this never comes to a realization. So it's a sort of constant edging, which is like insanely painful. But this is, I don't know if you're familiar with Mubi, it's a streaming platform that came out of the will to basically expand, in a way, streaming technology, streaming habits, and expand them to a more like sort of intellectual public. And me and Efe, which is the founder of the streaming platform, decided that we wanted to try and see what could happen if you add a different physical representation of cinema, knowing the fact that like we're not used anymore to look at movies in full black, and knowing the fact that cinemas in reality are like one of the most stupid format of architecture, in the sense it's a box that just need to be AC and basically light-proof and with fire exits. And you know that the only thing that you need to do there is to look at something in high definition. And this was a project we designed in Mexico. This is, like every time like there will be something that, in a way, gets to my eye and would be enough for me to come up with a project. So we designed this project in the midst, so which is over there, you can see it. And the idea was to, I'll get to something which is intelligible. So, so was to, where is it? Here. Was to design a project that was based on simply a structural shell, and would get into a sort of novelty-based like screening performance, in the sense that you will have two sloping walls and two, other partitions, and every wall in this structural shell was designed to support a single format of cinema. So like you will enter from the screen that is designed to showcase like premieres. You will face a huge sloping screen, so you could basically lay flat and look at movies that belong to Hollywood. And on the two side structural basically bands, you will see art videos and short movies. And the building was designed, so you see, was designed to be like a sort of naked structural host, so to stand within buildings and showcasing what is the neighboring. So basically, it was something that didn't have a core nor a real shell. It was just structure and screens. And so these are some images of the model. And so inside you will have, like, generally what I hate in a cinema is the fact that, like, you are sealed and you don't see any mechanism. We will have a projection, the projection technologies hanged from the roof and will turn and will transform all the different sides of the cinema into, like, a different screening project. So you will have this space as a, as an art gallery for, like, video art, as a, public square for, screening of public videos, or a simple cinema experience where everybody is simply concerned with, looking at one thing. And we designed also another project in London, in 180 The Strand, which is a 13,700 square meter brutalist building in the center of London. And there I sort of went mad and tried to have a cinema. We did two options, one fully covered in wood and one in that had only simple technologies to change the site. That was here, was a technical aluminum box on top of a floor, surrounded by buildings. And I was concerned with, like, early Thomas Edison architecture, in the sense that he was one of the first to develop proper technologies that were changing the way we invented the way to see at things. and this is the Thomas Edison Studios, in which you will try to have naturalistic condition of showcasing movies, and you will need natural light in order to shot something. And so one of the projects was concerned with the fact that we will use the oldest technology possible to create a black box. So this was a black box in wood in the middle of London, on top of a roof surrounded by buildings. And the other was to don't do anything to the sort of technical box or the technical building, and simply cut some holes and add black glass. So with the idea that you could stay in a cinema, have reflective glass reflect the surrounding environment, so you would not encounter any real problem with the aesthetical values that are applied when the Landscape Commission judges a project in London, and also look at the movie knowing that you are 20 meters from the ground surrounded by buildings. And knowing the fact that we don't look at movies anymore in full darkness. And inside, we sort of replicated the seat condition or the perspective condition of the first installment of contemporary or modern like cinema seating structure, which is the, if I'm not wrong, is the 1920 Nickelodeon cinema. I don't remember the city where it was, I'm sorry. And so we concerned ourselves with the use of glass and openings, which is so stupid, so you don't make a cinema with a window. And this was the project. So we reduced everything to a little window, but in a way that was, to me, the same as like political killings. Like you attack one person, and that one simple political act changes everything. Not that there is anything political about making a cinema, but in architecture, there is always this idea that we need to invent either grandiose system of belonging to the discipline, or we need to replicate, in a way, professional patterns. And these are some images of the models, and this is what we believed could have become. The main, the way this project was funded was ideally funded was to have the main owner of 180 The Strand be the sort of main money guy, and at a certain point, apart from general enthusiasm, he simply disappeared. And then we tried our luck with houses in Switzerland, and these are some images from like a recent book, a recent magazine that I've been the editor of, which is Flesh Art Volumes. And these are images from a peculiar show of Michael Smith at Suzanne Hilberry Gallery, which is a gallery in Chicago that was because it doesn't exist anymore, but it was situated in a building that looked like a sort of one-floor high school. And I was shocked by, this is a YouTube video that basically describes the show opening. And I was completely shocked by the fact that, like in a gallery, you have a simple status of domesticity, in the sense that you can have a drink, you can have your friends seated in a library, you can dress nice, but you can also showcase extreme art. And when I, like in the process of designing at least a lot of houses lately, I was always shocked by the level of the reason why we need to be domestic again in a sort of changing society, in the sense that I don't understand why people need a sort of lounge room anymore when, for instance, in Europe, everybody simply does coke all the time, and they won't ever need, I don't know, a sofa to stay on, while they will spend simply like the night on a table, snorting cocaine. And which is not really something to laugh about, but it's something that is really strange because habits are changing, but nevertheless, when people want an house, they still want something that they believe should be in an house, like a lounge room, a sofa, a kitchen, and whatever. And this is always, like, in a way, pushing architecture somewhere has always sort of depressed me. And I was depressed until I saw this video, and in a way you could live in a way that can still grant like historical social behavior or historical social patterns, like being happy and being familiar, but also sustain like more extreme behaviors. And so this is 2 houses that we designed for Rudolf Schürmann, which is a real estate developer in Switzerland. And this is, one house was to be, like, one house was an extension to the garden in like Basel in Mischenstrasse, and another one, like specifically this was designed to be a sort of concrete hall in like Uri Canton, like in the mountains. And these are some images, in the sense like I'm really convinced that I really want to destroy Switzerland. And so this is a plan of like the house in Basel, and this is a plan of the house in Uri. And the idea was to go against the grain and have architecture being something which is unseen, not in a sense that like we need to be crazy, but unseen in a sort of procedural term. Like I always refer in the studio to the word like droning, and I've always been sort of fascinated by the fact that like contemporary coding patterns or like contemporary like coding guys needs to enter in a sort of mode before being able to code for hours. And we don't really try to replicate that because there's nothing about coding in architecture really, even though like we're at SCI-Arc or I studied at AEA. But we try to be in a moment in which everything is against everything, like it's a sort of equation that will never be solved, but also go in a way in which like the procedural patterns by which we make architecture are simply moving towards something that is about anti-composition and basically the destruction of form, in the sense that is informal, even though it looks like I don't know, something from like a 2000 PlayStation advertisement, but nevertheless for us is architecture. And this is the house in Basel. We designed basically the extension to that. And I'm fixated with the work of Ellison and Peter Smithson, specifically the House for the Future. And they are convinced that they are art collectors. And I was a bit younger and a bit still romantic. So what we did was a confinement wall around the garden that will have technological devices to showcase art. So what you see over there in the white sort of flashy area is a glass cockpit that had cameras inside and would record car passing by in a sort of voyeuristic term and reproduce them delayed, which is something so stupid and something that is really sort of dilleresco video-y, but I could not basically refrain myself from doing that. And so this is what the house look. Also because it's simply like as a first project was a very nice way. Like generally you are never entitled to build an house for like a cool client, and so like you are like confined to design like a fence. But we did like the most complex fence possible with the most expensive technology possible. Because I was concerned, at that moment I was concerned with a book that by Mathieu Jung called Principe de Précaution, that was basically describing the condition by which when you live in the periphery or outside of the center of the city, in the specific case of like cognitarianate work in contemporary large corporation, you in a way start developing fear for everything, fear for property, fear from your life, to the level that you also fear your own children. And that book was so, in a way, spooky that the only thing we could do in Basel was to sort of go with it. Like, I don't believe that Basel is the center of anything, nor the center of art. And in a way, like, there are many ways by which I'm fixated with destroying Switzerland. And so my approach this time was to treat it as a provincial project. And this is the house in Uri. In a way, here we really went mad with form. We believed that we could make an house reducing wall technology or wall design, so not to have facades, and to precast a huge section of the house that will only have sort of distribution vectors through its exterior, so its skin, that was also structural. So in a way, we will never fully understand or develop a single field of architecture. And so we did this sort of monster, because I was, in a way, really convinced that like, we needed to find ways by which we would do everything in our power to destroy the discipline. And generally, so these were all the studies that we made. And the house was divided in two main sections, one public, one private, and we had, like, in the way you see these green things that were sort of storage facilities or bathroom or services. And these were all studies to reach, like, this house that looked, in a way, a sort of monster. But for us, it was everything that was possible to use, like, precast technologies that are, in a way, so intensely dense in the way architecture is produced today, and to also make handmade things. Like, the roof was supposed to be built without a strict casting process, so it would look really informal, and would replicate or, like, proxy geometries that are needed in order to have the legal entitlement to build buildings when there is no. And basta. So this was the main facade, which was, of course, unlegible. This is another project that we developed last year for a private investment fund, and we tried our best at real estate development. Of course, like, in order to present this project, I am fixated with Dogma 95, which is a manifesto signed by Thomas Winterberg and Lars von Trier, which I don't love as directors, but I love the manifesto. And Thomas Winterberg became famous because he did this movie called Festen, which was shot, which basically collected together, like, family trauma and digital cameras in a sort of indie blockbuster. And so we recorded the models. I've organized like a 16-person, or I don't remember, like 20-person dinner in the studio, and I let it rot for like 2 days, and then I shot models in it, making videos. But the project was I'll go to plans and section because we're still in architecture school. But the project was in Milan, and it was designed to substitute sort of in-block production building, which was this yellow thing, and substitute it with the maximum amount of space and volumes that is needed. And we believe that in Italy at the moment everybody is trying to, like, there is no identity, not even structural identity in Italian architecture, and what is missing in Italy at the moment is a full concrete building, and we wanted to try and see if, with a benevolent client, if we could make a building that looked in a way incognito, but also in full concrete. So not really to design anything, but to make the simple maximum volumes possible, and the only novelty factor will be the fact that it's a raw concrete building, which is something which is disappearing in Europe because of law regulation with insulation, etc., etc., etc. And so we reduced the mass to the only footprint that worked for us in terms of length and space, and every floor was a single flat for a small family or a small bachelor or like a small creative director. And the building, for me personally, was an attempt to design a tower that sort of needed to avoid the necessary formats of involvement with architecture. I hate designing windows and I hate designing like openings in a building because I'm still a sort of stupid guy that is convinced that mass is the most performative approach when you design architecture, and you want architecture to be a sort of like urban format of terrorism. Like I still believe that if you design a building that has some sort of kink, this would make an impact on a neighborhood, on the discipline, or in a city. And I wanted to do this in Milan, inside of basically a block where nobody could see a building. So I really wanted this building to not have any features. And at a certain point then we had to, because of law restriction in terms of height and visibility, we had to basically operate a cut. And at the end, the only format possible for me was to sort of add technologies to the top and make it a sort of cartoonish reinterpretation of a Japanese building with antennas on top. And this is what the buildings looks like at the moment. So basically a piece of stone with some technologies on top of it. And this is another house that we designed last year in northern Italy. The client was a developer and sadly was arrested before. and yeah, and his request was really silly. Like, I want an 11 per 11 concrete square, and the house was on a sloping piece of land, and what we did was to basically transform the house in our interpretation of what I believe was architecture at a certain point, like over the 2000. So we didn't really do any design. We simply moved aesthetical regimes in order to have our house match a moment in architecture that I believed could be a sort of contemporary asset again, without, of course, the client knowing, because if you're a real estate developer in Italy, you don't understand a fuck. And so the house was designed to look like that, and the presentation was really simple. I asked a friend of us, which is Elliot Howard, which is an architectural historian, to recite over a looping videos eulogies of architects that I love, like Dennis Latson, John Winter, and Jonathan Wolff.
1914 to 2000.
This was the presentation.
Text compiled from The Guardian, The New York Times, The Los Angeles Times, Building Magazine, The Architectural Review, and the Royal College of Physicians. Sir Dennis Latson.
It goes for 15 minutes. I'm not going to show you this. So at the end, we had to refrain from this abstract-looking thing that would only provide us like a sort of fake Villaret building. And we went into something super stupid, so we did openings. And we tried to have the most sort of stupid-looking building. And we managed to pass most of the landscape commission rules. And we sort of concentrated ourselves on like from previous project, we always try to, like in museum, we try to be violent. With early houses, we try to be like over formalistic in a way to accelerate form to the level that it would implode, explode, and become a sort of aesthetical terrorism against the discipline. But in like recent years, we need to survive professionally. And I was also very depressed by the fact that, in a way, extremism in architecture will not work. And so I really tried to lay my head down and